Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. I'm your host, Richard Kaufman. Guys, as you know, I'm a ninth grade dropout, but I've read over 6,000 books in my lifetime. And the book that we're going to be talking about is one of my favorites of all time. Look
Wow.
Ma, No Hands. It's amazing. The author is amazing. She's a Hall of Famer. She's changing the world. She is the Swiss Army knife of positivity, and she's changed the world. She's changed my world with her book, and her story is going to change your life. So, Doe, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. I'm humbled by that introduction.
Well, I'm humbled that we finally got together. And before I forget, I just want to give a big shout out to your niece. She did a great job
No,
illustrating
my
this book.
granddaughter.
Was your
Granddaughter.
granddaughter? I'm sorry. So I just wanted to give it, Courtney, amazing
Yeah.
job. You are awesome. So I just wanted to say that before we got started and I forget. So how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing okay, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Well,
This is the
I'm
best
truly
thing that's
blessed.
happened to me so far today.
Yeah, and I'm truly blessed and humbled. Like I said, I love your book, and we're going to talk about that. I'm just amazed because I wrote my book, I guess, about 5 years ago. It hit number one twice on Amazon. But
Wow.
your book got published on your 80th birthday.
Yep.
You know, a
Yep.
lot of people say, after age of 50, it's all downhill. You're going uphill.
I 50 was a hard birthday for me, in fact. At the time, I was a dean at the University of Connecticut, and it was my birthday, and I went into the office and I turned on my computer, and my screensaver had been changed, and it said Dean Doe is 50 today. And then I printed something, and the first thing that came out of the printer was Dean Doe is 50 today. I was miserable. I was not ready to be 50. I look back on it now and I say, holy cow, that was so long ago. And what's the deal? Every day you're given is a wonderful opportunity to continue to grow and learn. And yeah, I'm not anywhere near ending as far as I know.
And by
You
the
ha-
way, I'm a big UConn Husky fan. Always have been. Always followed the basketball programs. Two
yep.
amazing coaches. Great college. So, but first,
Yeah.
before I even get started, I gotta ask because if I have a traumatic brain injury, where if I don't ask, I'll forget. What
Okay.
is your definition of resiliency?
Well, I don't think of it as a single concept. I think of resiliency goes right along with opportunity and challenge, and optimism. Resiliency to me is what you learn when you are able to pick yourself up after something awful has happened to you. And I'm pretty convinced that our lives are supposed to give us opportunities to have to pick ourselves up. That's what life is about. Figuring out how to deal with something that you didn't expect. And so to me, resiliency is the evidence that you have learned to pick yourself up. And then I'm optimistic that the next time something terrible happens, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. I'm dealing with something that I'm figuring out right now. And friends said to me, well, what happened is I totaled my car about 10 weeks ago. And turns out when I changed my car insurance, for some reason I didn't get rental cars. So when I found out I wasn't going to get a rental car, I decided, maybe this is a signal from my angels. You read my book. You know that my angels are with me all the time. Maybe this is a signal to my angels that I'm not supposed to be driving anymore. And so I've decided to experiment with not replacing my car. And that's how I've told people I'm experimenting. And I don't feel restricted. I don't feel frustrated. I don't feel angry. I am challenged. I have to do things in different ways. But it's kind of cool to figure out how to keep my life going. I'm 80 years old. I work full time. I also just wrote this little book, and I'm finding out that writing the book was the easy part of being an author. I have a lot of other things going on in my life, and I'm able to do it all without a car. I've figured it out. And so that gives me courage that the next crazy thing that happens, I will be able to do it. And I think that's what resiliency is. It's knowing that you have the power in you to do what needs to be done in order to get get it done.
And and that's something that I love. And by the way, once soon as I get done with this, as soon as we hit finish record, I'm sending it right to my mother as soon as we get done, because she's going through some of the same things that we're going to be talking about. And she's an optimist. She's a Christian also. She believes in her angels. So I'm going to be sending this to her as soon as we get done. Maybe she'll leave me watching. So hopefully, but I
Good.
believe, like when I lost my vision, that for me it was a new normal, and it was
Mm-hmm.
either I can either suck it up and see what I can do and not focus on what I can't do.
Yeah.
And I believe, because like I said, I'm only a ninth grade dropout, but I've read over 6,000 books, and I love to study and read. And the more I learn about the brain and the reticular activating system, that whatever you search for, you're going to find. So if you
Yeah.
search for problems, you're going to
Yeah.
find problems. But if you search for solutions, that's what you're going to find, right?
Oh, I agree. I agree 100%. By the way, speaking of brains, I've just completed the paperwork to donate my brain to a research study. It's not like donating other organs. Of course, they've told me that by the time I check out, nobody will want my organs. They'll be so old. But my brain, no matter how old I am, is going to be useful to this study. They need normal brains as well as abnormal brains. We haven't talked about the fact yet that I have Parkinson's disease, and I've exhibited symptoms for over 20 years. It was diagnosed in 2009, misdiagnosed in 2004. I think when they look at my brain, they're going to say it doesn't look like a Parkinson's brain. There are people who there's a big study going on. It's been going on for years with people who agreed dozens of years ago, many, many years ago, to be part of this study. And they're studied throughout their life. It's about dementia and Alzheimer's. And when they die, their brains go to the study. And what they are beginning to find now that these older people are passing away, they are finding that some people who have no obvious symptoms or illustrate anything that looks like they have Alzheimer's, when they dissect their brains, they look just like an Alzheimer's brain, with all the plaques and everything. And yet these people did not exhibit any of the loss of memory or cognitive problems. I think it's because if we choose to, we can get past or work through. Our brains can learn to do what they need to do if we give them the opportunity to do that, instead of checking out and saying, well, I've got Parkinson's, and so I can't do anything anymore.
Now look at somebody just said, such a beautiful lady. You can see her soul shining through the screen.
Oh, thank you. Thank
See,
you.
you're making an impact, and we didn't even get started yet. That's what I love. I love it. I love it. I love it. So,
Well, I can't see that. That's coming through on a chat, huh?
Yep, that comes right through on the chat. Yep.
Yeah, it's so tiny on my screen, I can't read it. We have not talked about what led me to write the book, or what this book is about.
We haven't even gotten started yet. So tell us a little bit. We're gonna hop in the Wayback Machine. So tell us a little bit about where'd you come from, where'd you grew up, and then tell us about the experience when you broke both your. You tell it better than I did.
Yep. Born in 1942, so I'm going on 81. I'll be 81 in October. I think it's becoming more interesting the older I get. My first career was as a child actress. When I was going to start school, they wanted to put me in first grade, and I was tiny, and my mother said no. She herself had graduated from high school early, and it was not a pleasant thing for her. It didn't work for her. She said, nope, Dolores, that's my real name. Dolores isn't going to skip school. And the school suggested dramatic lessons. They said she needs to do something that will occupy her mind. This is the days before gifted education. And I would have been in gifted education if they had it. So they suggested dramatic lessons because I was very verbal. My mother happened to find the good one in St. Louis. We lived in the suburbs of St. Louis. My daddy worked at McDonald Aircraft. By the way, he only went through ninth grade as well. He had dropped out during the Depression to help support his family. He was one of 8 children. Uh, I started dramatic lessons. It happened to be 1947. I was in a little church play, and somebody said to my mother, "You should take Dolores to KSD. They're auditioning children for television." And she said, "What is television?" 1947. What is television? I got on the show. It turned out to be a children's variety show on Saturday mornings, and I was the actress. And they had two little boys that danced and sang, and a little girl that danced and sang. I became the actress, the child actress in St. Louis. Before I could read, I was on a radio soap opera that went nationwide Saturday mornings, and they would deliver the script to me on Wednesdays. It seems to me it was Tuesday or Wednesday. They would hand carry a script to me, and my mother would help me memorize the script, and then we would go and rehearse for a half an hour before we went live coast to coast on the radio. And of course, during that rehearsal, they would change the lines. They would cut a line out, they would add something, and I had to re-memorize without knowing how to read those conversations. I think one of the gifts from that time is that I remember conversation beautifully. People have accused me of tape recording conversations because I can remember them word for word. Didn't learn to tie my shoes, but I did learn to memorize conversation. We wound up visiting family in New York when I was the summer before I turned 8. My parents were both from New York and Boston, and we visited my aunt and uncle on Long Island, and my mother thought it would be fun to see if I could get a job in New York. Everything was live in those days. She found an ad for a little girl to do a commercial that was going to be the tryout, and the commercial were going to be while we were there. So we went out to New York. We were on Long Island. I don't know whether we went out or down or up, but I remember looking at this skyscraper building. It was the tallest building I'd ever seen. I remember going up in the elevator, and the doors of the elevator opened, and there's this long row of beautiful little girls in their pastel pinafores trying out for this commercial. I'd had one audition in my life, which was that very first one. I got the job. And we came back to my aunt's house, and my mother said, "Dolores got the job. We have to go back on Friday. She's going to be on television eating cereal." I ate a lot of cereal in those days. And my father went over to Republic Aircraft in Long Island and got a job there. My father was Jewish. He was discriminated against openly at McDonnell Aircraft at that time. He was a foreman. And he'd been told no Jew will ever be more than a foreman at McDonnell as long as I'm here, said one of the big shots. So he went over to Republic and got hired as a general foreman. 2.5 years later, I did a lot of TV, a lot of radio. They loved my voice. It was not a squeaky little girl's voice. My parents wanted me to have a normal childhood, so they did not put me in professional children's school. Instead, my mother picked me up at my grade school every day at lunchtime, and we would go down into the city almost every day, where I would either have a rehearsal or an audition or a performance of some kind. So I didn't have a normal childhood at all. Nobody else at my school was doing that. But 2.5 years later, McDonnell Aircraft called my daddy back and offered him the job of superintendent of the factory. And he said to me, "What should we do?" And I said, "Well, you should make this decision based on your career, not mine." I was 11 years old. I said, I'm beginning to grow up, and I'm not a child anymore. I'm not doing little children on TV. I'm doing a lot of radio because of my voice, but I think we should do what you want to do. So we went back to St. Louis, and I got new professional composites made. I am not a little girl anymore. I am very much an adolescent. And about 6 months later, I came home from school one day and I said, "I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be a cheerleader. I want to be on student council. I want to be like everybody else." And so I stopped. Nobody pushed me. Nobody dragged me. If I wanted to stop, I stopped. Never made cheerleading. I wasn't a very good cheerleader. I did make student council. I was a leader way back then. That gets me up to high school. I graduated from Kirkwood High School, suburb of St. Louis. Go Pioneers. Went to a women's college my freshman year, Chatham College, which is now Chatham University. It's a co-ed university now. Transferred to the University of Missouri and graduated in speech and drama. I was a Woodrow Wilson Fellow which meant that my graduate study was funded by the Woodrow Wilson Foundation. There is a story in my book about the female professor who encouraged me to consider graduate school. I told her I was getting married, and she said, "You can do both." And she nominated me for this wonderful national fellowship. My new husband and I went to Chicago. Uh, I did my master's degree at Northwestern in 1 year, taught high school for 1 year, and went home to be a mom. I have a son and a daughter. They were born in 65 and 68. And I really thought I was going to have a fairly traditional life. Uh, it didn't work for me. It didn't work for me. This was 1963. I was married. And by 1972, I was really struggling. I was depressed. I was on Valium before they knew how bad Valium was for you. When my son and daughter were in school, in nursery school, I was taking a nap every day. I had no energy. I read a book. Well, we were in marriage counseling, my husband and I. He was my high school sweetheart, and then he became my husband, and eventually he became my ex-husband. But at that time, we were in marriage counseling, and we had a therapist who, I don't know exactly how he did this, but he gave me the permission to give myself permission to make a change in my life. And what I decided I needed to do was go to work. Nobody I knew was working, quote unquote. But I found a book in the library called How to Go to Work When Your Children Are Not Old Enough, and your husband's against it, your children are not old enough, and there's nothing you can do anyway. That is a real book. You can still find it on Amazon. It was an early book in the early women's movement, published by Catalyst, one of the first women's organizations. And they showed you how to make a resume based on what you knew how to do and what you had accomplished, even without a paid job. As a mother, as somebody running a house, as an active community volunteer, I had done a lot of things. And long story short, I wound up getting a job at the community college, Harper College in Palatine, Illinois, to start a women's program for women like myself. They thought they needed an enrichment program for all these college-educated women who lived in suburbia who didn't have any outlet for their energy and their intellectual energy and what have you, who were taking Valium. I need to tell you, I didn't take another Valium pill from the first day I started work. My husband was not supportive. I didn't know he'd be there when I came home from work the first day. He did not know that I had even interviewed for the job. But that's what started my career in adult education. We did separate. I was promoted after a year to be director of community services. We separated. He was having a hard time with the idea of his wife working because he felt this communicated to the world that he was not adequately providing for the family. We have to go back. This is 1973. People today who are younger have no idea how limited the opportunities and options were for many of us. So we separated and we reconciled, and that's when I decided to go back to school and get my doctorate. I thought, I'm not working just for my mental health. I may actually be needed to support myself and my children. So I went back to school full time, got a doctorate in adult education and urban education with a concentration in adult education at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, which was 90 miles away. I did a 90-mile commute when my kids were 7 and 9. Tom told me he thought that going back to school was the craziest thing I had ever done. That's when I really began to think that maybe that wasn't the craziest thing I had done, that maybe we just weren't going to work out together. I graduated on May 20th, 1979, and I joined the faculty at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee as a professor in the department that I had studied under. I was a professor for 3 years. I absolutely loved it. And that's when Tom and I separated. I was the one who said, this is not working. And I think it's relevant. I'm being very personal here. Is that okay?
That's what we're here for. This is a real program. We're
Yeah.
real people. There's no show. It's all go. There's no show. So whatever
Well,
you say, whatever comes from your heart, that's what we want to hear.
and I'm not shy. I think I learn from other people, and I think sometimes people can learn from me. And it's hard to make the kind of choices that I made throughout my life. At one point, Tom said to me that I was very selfish. He said, when we separated, he said, if you weren't so selfish, you would come back. And I said, I don't think this is about being selfish. I think it's just about doing what makes sense for all of us. Um, we separated, and and I I left, and I got a job in Brockport, New York, as a dean. I needed to make more money than I could make as a professor, and my daughter came with me. My son stayed with his dad. Brian was going into his junior year in high school, and Karen was going into her freshman year. So she spent 4 years in 4 years in Brockport High School, and um, I was hired at Brockport to. They told me, in no uncertain terms, I was the 10th dean of continuing education that they'd had in 10 years. It was a revolving door. And the president said to me, what we need you to do is stabilize the enrollment of the institution. They were on a downhill slide. They'd had to lay off faculty. It was a really bad situation. And he said, we need you to stabilize the institution's enrollment by getting more adult students here. I knew how to do that, and I was very successful. 3.5 years later, we were stable. We were growing. The number of adult students had gone from about 19% to about 35%, and the whole student body had gotten larger as a result. We really had transformed the institution. They now were prepared to serve adult students. When I went there, they didn't have the right kind of policies or procedures in place. We really transformed the institution. It's one of the proudest accomplishments of my professional career is the way I was able to implement what I had learned and what I knew as an adult educator, put it to practice, and and watch all these adult students turn their lives around. Oh my God! I I started a little newspaper for the adult students at the university, and it was called "Doing Your Part." In adult education, we believe that education needs to be collaborative. That we do this together. That doesn't mean that I'm sitting in the room watching you learn. It means I'm learning right along with you, even if I'm the teacher. But it also means that you, as the learner, have to do your part. And so my little newsletter was called "Doing Your Part," and I would
But, but,
encourage them
but
where they
also,
had.
don't you agree that if you want to learn something, teach somebody else to how to do it?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
you have to put in the extra work if you're going to be able to teach somebody else. So a lot
Yeah.
of times, like I do a Thursday newsletter, which you'll be getting next week, and a lot of times it'll be something that I really don't know a lot about. Now I got to take a deep dive into it, learn it, so I can teach it, and that's how I've
Yeah.
learned to do what I do is just by I say I'm going to teach somebody else, so now I got to take a deep dive and I've got to learn, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you own it.
Yeah.
You own the knowledge, you own the understanding. Uh, I wound up having a major disagreement at I'm getting up to the book here. Major disagreement with the president of the college. We were so successful in increasing enrollment that he decided that as the dean of continuing ed, I should report to the marketing vice president. And I said, no, I'm an academic. We're successful because we have academic programs. I was losing that argument, and so I decided to leave the institution, and I announced my resignation in December, effective July. Went on a job hunt. I was very open. Everybody knew. And 10 days after I was offered the job at the University of Connecticut as Dean of Continuing Education there, 35,000 students, in continuing education. $9 million operation. 10 days after I accepted that job, I smashed my elbows in a bicycle accident. And I wound up with both arms. I don't know if you can see that because of my name tag. Both arms crossed across my chest in casts for 6 months. The name of the book is Look Ma No Hands, Life's Lessons Learned the Hard Way. 10 days after I took the biggest job that I'd ever had in my life, they asked me during my interview, are you ready for this job? This is bigger than anything you've done before. And I said, well, it's only 10 times bigger. 10 times more students, 10 times more budget, 10 times more faculty and staff. And I said, one time my husband and I bought our second house. The mortgage was 10 times bigger than our first mortgage. We knew how to pay the bank. I think that was a really naive and stupid answer, but they were no smarter than me and they gave me the job. And my angels, you know, when you take a new job, you want to demonstrate to the world that you're wonderful. Yep, you guys picked the right person. Look at what I can do. I can fix every problem you ever had. Have you ever had that, Richard?
Oh,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
Even today. So,
and it's probably the worst thing in the world to do when you're brand new in a job because you don't know anything. My angels knew that that's what I would have done. So they smashed my elbows. They tied my hands literally in that bicycle accident, that horrible bicycle accident. And I watched and I listened. And by the time I could really begin to make changes and begin to function physically, I didn't make mistakes. I knew how to do it. But in the meantime,
before we even get started,
yeah,
I want to. They call me the male Oprah or the GI Joe Rogan, so I want to
yeah,
go real deep. But I want to thank our sponsors, guys.
yeah,
As you know, I'm all about family. I love to eat, obviously, but the company down below, Muriel's, it's an amazing Italian eatery. If you're ever in New Jersey, stop by. The food is actually all homemade. Her mom actually came off the boat from Italy, so everything you get is handmade and made with love. So if you guys love Italian food and you're in New Jersey, stop by Muriel's. Also, guys, if you are in admissions, if you're a CEO, CFO, if you're in charge of a college, just remember that veterans are the ultimate minority. Only 2% of veteran people in the United States ever served this country. So if you want to hire great people, hire a veteran. And a lot of people don't realize why they need to hire veterans. If you hire a veteran, you know you're going to get somebody who's going to show up every day. Somebody that's going to put in the work hard every single day. And a lot of people don't realize that when you hire a veteran, you get huge tax breaks. Huge tax breaks. So, guys, if you are a CEO, CFO, if you're in charge of a company or a college, let's help you get your company ready to be vet ready. So, guys, if you are interested in hiring veterans, write that down below and I'll get that information to you. Now, I want to ask you, because sometimes I believe the backstory is sometimes more important than the front story. Take us back to the hour before the accident and an hour after the accident.
Well, actually, I didn't realize how bad the accident was. I was starting a physical fitness program. I'm always starting physical fitness programs. They never last very long. And I had a friend who was a runner, and I thought, ooh, maybe I should start running because I'm going to be in Connecticut. My daughter was going to start college. I was going to be living alone. I thought I'll have time to really get serious about physical fitness. And I tried running and my legs were not strong enough. And he said to me, do you like to ride a bike? Because that could strengthen your legs. So that's, it was kind of almost a spur of the moment. I said, well, yeah, I used to ride a bike when I was a kid. And my daughter had a bike, a 10-speed bike. I'd never ridden a 10-speed bike. And Ray took the bike off the rack in the garage. We put the air in the tires and we took off. He's running, I'm riding the bike. He got ahead of me. I went down a hill and smashed into a car. I smashed into the car. So the hour before, I mean, it wasn't like this was a particularly important moment, and I wasn't until months, weeks later that I really realized that I was in deep trouble. There were complications with the way the injury was treated. I wound up eventually in November at the Mayo Clinic, um, being treated by the man who wrote the book on elbows, the book on elbows. Uh, but it was the impact of this incident and the impact it was having on my life came, well, I think I never let it get really bad because, you've read the book, Richard. I came home from the hospital. I was in the hospital 5 days. And the first thing I did was ask a friend who was staying with me, Meg, who I just found after we wrote the book. My daughter and I found Meg. We reconnected with her after 40 years. Uh, I asked her to put a newsprint on the wall. I said, we're going to write on the wall everything I can do with no hands. And she said, that's a small list. That was my approach from the very beginning. What can I do? Because let me tell you, when you have no hands, there's not a lot you can do. And it's easy to focus to see what you can't do. So I think that was a turning point for me, Richard, realizing that I needed to focus on what I can do. And I said, we're going to grow that list. And the first thing I could do was laugh and I could smile. And she said, this is in the book. She said, you can also cry, Doe. And I said, no, no crying. She said, Doe, it's serious. It's okay to cry. You don't have to be brave 24/7. And I said, no, no crying. Because when I cry, my nose starts to run. And then somebody comes at me with a Kleenex and I feel like I'm being smothered. Uh, at the end of the book, I say that one of the lessons I have learned is that the kind person who wipes my nose will not suffocate me. Someday, I have Parkinson's, and someday I'm going to have other people wipe my nose again, and I know they're not going to suffocate me.
Well, and because that's why, like I said, I'm on my fourth iteration of the book. But it touched me because when I lost 80% of my vision, and I was in darkness,
Yeah,
and the reason why I asked, the hour before and the hour after, or day before, or day after, is because the hour before me going blind, I was able to do anything. I was a tank commander. I was in the military. I was doing 100 push-ups and 100 sit-ups.
yeah,
And the hour after I lost my vision, I can't even make it to the bathroom. I can't even
yeah,
wipe myself. I
yeah,
can't take, and for 18 months, I was like that. And it's when God said, you know what? You know, he said, either you're going to be humble or I'm going to humble you.
mhm,
And he humbled me. And that's why I call my wife my bride, my best friend. She's my everything. But there were times when I had to say, honey, you know, can you give me a glass of water? And here, a week before, I'm in charge of $100 million vehicle and 10 men.
yeah.
So it was that things can change very, very
Oh,
quickly.
yeah, yeah.
You
Well,
know,
my list of things I could do included I could lick my pain pills off the counter. And people laughed at that when I said, when I would find something I could do, I'd ask somebody else to write it on the wall because I couldn't write it on the wall. Found another one. I can lick my pain pills off the counter. Somebody said, well, why do you care about that? And I said, well, that means I don't have to bother somebody else. I don't have to bother somebody else at night. That means they can sleep at night. And that was important to me. Whatever I could do independently was very important because I couldn't do very much. And I learned to ask for help. The book tells stories, all true. Everything in that book is absolute true. Tells stories about things that happened, and one of our favorite ones is when, uh, even having figured out a wonderful way to bathe me, we had forgotten to wash under my arms, and my arms were like this all the time. 4 weeks after the accident, we really discovered it was important to wash under your arms, and it's a funny, funny chapter. When I wrote it and sent it to my daughter, she called me and she said, "I'm laughing so hard I wet my pants," because we remember those things, and we did laugh a lot. But I came to respect people who have disabilities and challenges and struggle to do things. I came to respect them, and when they insist on doing it themselves, I really appreciate that. It'd be easier for me to do it for them, but nope, they want to do it themselves, and boy, I understand that. The
But,
work I
but
do now, the
but
work,
when
the
you
work,
got hurt, when you got hurt, you know,
yeah,
if somebody would say, cross your arms for 6 hours, they would be like, after that 6 hours, they'd be like, all right, I can't do this anymore. But for
yeah.
you, it wasn't 6 hours, 6 days, it was 6 months.
And then 2 years after that, for 2 years, 24/7, I had both arms in these splints that had turnbuckles on them. You know what a turnbuckle is? It's a
Yeah.
mechanism. And what I had to do was keep turning it all day to try to straighten my arms out. The man who wrote the book on elbows told me I would probably never use my left arm again because it had healed in a dislocated position after 2 surgeries. And he said, I don't think you'll ever be able to use your arm again. And he told me what he would do. And I said, have you ever done this before? He said, 20 times. I said, did it work? He said, 18 times, and I haven't given up on the other two. Can you see that? I can't move my arm normally, but I can move it. He did that. He did that for me, and I can do everything I need to do. Um,
But now,
I
what?
it's
Because
amazing.
I live in gratitude. I'm a gratitude guy.
Yeah.
Like before I go to bed at night, this is a life hack for everybody knows my life hack. Before I go to bed at night, I put my arm around my wife. I pray for her happiness and her health. And then I say 3 things that I'm grateful for that happen throughout the day. And then when I wake up in the morning, if I could see something, I I cry out to the Lord. I say, Lord, thank you. It's going to be an amazing day. And I think if when something happens to you like what happened to us, you have a real appreciation of the smallest things in life. So talk
And
about
when
gratitude.
and when the next thing, my mother, very late in life, suddenly began to experience epileptic seizures. Uh, it was actually from a head injury. And when she was suffering and having convulsions in my arms, and we were trying to get her medicated and get her figured out, I kept asking, why does she have to suffer like this? Why does she have to suffer this? When my daughter was 16, my daughter stood up from the dining room table and went into a grand mal seizure. And I remember as I held her in my arms and called to her boyfriend and told him what to tell the ambulance as they were coming to her. I remember thinking, thank God, I know now why this had to happen to my mother. Now I know what to do. I know what to do. And my daughter will know when she wakes up that this is not the end of her life. My mother became well controlled and managed. You never know, when something horrible happens to you. I know that there's cause for celebration somewhere. We don't know it all the time. We don't see it all the time. And sometimes we really have to work to find it. But I know it's there, and I trust that and I believe that. And so when the crap happens, I say to myself, all right, this is pretty shitty. But somewhere in here, there's something to learn that I'm going to be glad that I've learned it. And I find that's true. I find that's true. When I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I said, I know how to live with Parkinson's. I could live with no hands, and I can do this now.
Now, something that my mentor, Mr. Ed Milet, always says, and I adopted it, is that nothing happened to me. It all happened for me, whether it was the
Oh, I love
abuse,
that.
whether it was the abuse, whether it was the alcoholism, the homelessness, the drugs, whatever it was for what I'm doing now. for, everything that I've ever
Yep.
ever done, it's leading up to this moment, sitting, talking to you, helping others. And my mess became my message.
And let me kind of wrap up this part of this conversation by saying that's exactly what I feel today. I have been when I retired from higher education in 2000. I wanted to be a hands-on grandma. I had a 2-year-old grandson who is now 25 and 6'4". But I wanted to spend time with Matthew. I retired from higher education, and I got a part-time job at Leadership Greater Hartford, which is a nonprofit community leadership organization, one of the biggest and one of the best in the country. They hired me to develop a program for retired people to help them learn how to be effective leaders in the community. And by leadership, I was asked in my interview how I define leadership, and I said I don't think it's about being in charge. I think leadership is giving the best you have to the work of the group and helping others do the same. And that's become Leadership Greater Hartford's definition of leadership, if you will. I'm still there 23 years later. I can't imagine ever retiring again. But about 2 years ago, when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2009, the program that I run for retired adults, we're actually gearing up to start a new program in October. I'm recruiting people right now for that class. That's a big part of what I was doing this morning. We help people find their gifts, find their talents, their strengths. Too many people, as they age, think they have nothing left to offer, and yet they've got wisdom and they've got experience and they know how to do things and they know how to figure things out. And our communities need that. Our families need that. So what we do with the Third Age Initiative is help them find what their talents are, and then they work together in teams and create initiatives that help the world get better. My Parkinson's, my neurologist has been saying to me for years, she wishes she could give people a dose of dough. She said, my other patients lose their identity. They become a Parkinson's patient. And she said, Doe, you have not lost your identity. I said, no, I made up my mind when I was diagnosed that this was going to be an asterisk in my life. It wasn't going to keep me from doing what I do, from being who I am. And I said, I think that's how it works. One day I literally got up, Richard, and I said, oh my God, I know what a dose of dough is. And it's really a version of this Third Age Initiative program that we've been doing for 23 years at Leadership Greater Hartford. And I talked to my neurologist, who is she's the medical director of the Chase Family Movement Disorder Center with Hartford Healthcare in Hartford. And we developed and have piloted a program for Parkinson's patients to help them find what they can do, celebrate what they can do, celebrate what brings them joy, and find ways to give that back to the community. Because if you focus totally on yourself and what you need, we know that leads to despair and an old age that is not fulfilling. If you can begin to focus some of your energy and your talent on how you can help others, how you can make the world a better place for those that are coming after you, your later years will be those of integrity. You will feel that your life was well lived. That's what we want. I want to know that I was loved and that I did love and that I made a difference in the world. We can do that. And that's what motivated me to write my book. As we were working on a contract for Leadership Greater Hartford to develop this program for the Parkinson's. And I said Parkinson's patients and their significant others, because if your partner has something like Parkinson's or dementia or chronic illness of any kind, you get drawn into that also. It impacts your life just as well. And you want to do well. You want to do good for them. You want to help them. My mother, when my father had heart problems, she thought that her role in life had become making sure that he never ate ice cream again because he was not supposed to eat ice cream. It was not helpful for their relationship for her to take that on as her job. But that's what motivated me to finish the book. I had started it 10 years before, and I thought, nobody's going to read this. People do read it, and they say, we all need to have these kinds of lessons. Focus on what you can do. Know there is cause for celebration. Get help when you need it. Don't be afraid to recognize and admit that you might be the problem. Sometimes the things that don't go well for me, I want to blame it on Parkinson's. Ugh, that's because of Parkinson's. You know what? It's because of how I'm dealing with Parkinson's. And the other thing that I do in the book that people have really loved, um, I think when we build our lives, Richard, it's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. Only nobody gives you the box with the picture on the front. You get these pieces that you start out with and you begin to put them together. And you know, when I was 20 years old, I thought I knew what kind of picture I was drawing or putting together. And then things don't work. You know, the pieces don't fit. Here's a piece I really want to use and it doesn't fit in. And then something happens like you smash your elbows. It's like somebody knocked half of the pieces off the table. And it's too easy to sit back and say, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. My life is ruined. My jigsaw puzzle is ruined. I think it's our job to figure out how to keep making that puzzle and put it together in a way that works. We have that strength. Another lesson I would want to teach besides positivity and resilience is self-efficacy. I am the one putting this puzzle together. I'm being given challenges. People are taking the puzzle pieces away. People are dropping pieces on my table that I didn't want. But it's my job to make this puzzle fit, to make it work for me. And I tell people, don't put the edges on the puzzle first. When I'm doing a real jigsaw puzzle, that's what I do. I put the edges on because that's a boundary, right? You don't want a boundary in your life. You don't want a boundary in your life. You want to be able to go where you can go. Something comes your way and you say, "Ooh, I wonder how that would work. I wonder if I can do that." And sometimes you can't, but sometimes you can. So I'm standing back now, I back off of my table from an 80-year-old viewpoint, and it's almost done. I know there's not much more to build.
Well, you know,
You
I
know
wanted
what?
to say,
I love this picture, Richard. I need to say it. It's a beautiful picture. I love my life, and every single piece that's here belongs, even when I didn't want it. Even when I didn't want it.
but you know, I want to touch on that because, like, I had a big epiphany the other night. Um, God's been calling me. He's been calling me. He's been calling me since I've been a teenager, and I haven't been picking up the phone until the other day. He's like, "It's time to pick up," and I finally said, "You know what, Lord? I'm yours. Whatever you want, I got you." And somebody, we were having breakfast in Atlantic City. Somebody came up to me and said, "You're the guy I'm supposed to talk to today." And I was like, "There it is." But I think a lot of people, like you're talking about pictures, God has a picture for our life. He has a plan, but
And we have to
we're
discover
trying to
it.
put a totally different puzzle together.
Yep.
You know,
We have to
and God has a
discover it.
sense of, God has a sense of humor. You know,
Oh, yeah.
he'll let us think he's in charge, that we're in charge, but he's really in charge, right?
Well, I might argue. I think he's in charge um, in terms of giving us the opportunity to learn what we're supposed to learn. But we're the ones that have to learn it. We're the ones that have to learn it. I really believe that. Um, I I think if we give up and say, well, the concern I have is if we say God's in charge and then we can blame him or her.
Mm.
God is all that is. If God was in charge of this, I could get pretty angry that he let me run into into that automobile, or that he gave me Parkinson's. I think we are given opportunities to learn and to grow, and I think that's my work to do in life. Back in 1977 at a national conference, I heard a speaker who said, "We all have a work to do in life that cannot be done in less than a lifetime." And then he said, "Not many of us get paid to do that work. We have jobs that pay the bills so that we can do our work to do in life." Richard, you know what your work to do in life is, don't you?
Yep.
You can't not do it. I
Yep.
happen to be one of those lucky people that as long as I stay working at LGH, Leadership Greater Hartford, I do get paid to do my work in life because my work to do in life is to help people learn to grow and change and take what's given to them by God or whoever, Some people don't believe in God. However it is you wind up with these opportunities, it's given to you so that you can learn. And I feel like I have been put in this place on this planet at this moment in time to use everything I ever learned, starting when I was a little girl, and I was acting. I was memorizing lines. I was listening to people so that I could remember the conversation. Everything I have ever learned, I am being called on to use right now with this program with the Parkinsons people. Um, and I need to do it better than I've ever done it before. How motivating is that? Yeah, I'm 80 years old. Fortunate palm readers tell me I've got 40 more years to live, that I'm going to live to be 120. So I don't have to rush, but
There
I'm
you go.
not quitting.
So for the last 10 minutes, because like we talked about earlier, your book is very near and dear to my heart. I have several people in my family dealing with Parkinson's, dementia,
Yeah.
Alzheimer's. And a lot of times we really don't hear it from the person that has it telling us how we can help the person that has it. Because a lot of people, like on my podcast, I keep an empty cup here. And there's a reason why I keep it empty, because I can't pour from it if it's empty.
Ah,
And there's so many people that become caregivers and they don't care for themselves,
yeah.
and they're no good at caring for the person. So talk
Yeah.
to us from the person that has the Parkinson's, and then afterwards tell us how we, including me, because I'm here learning, like you said earlier, you got to learn, and the best way to teach is to learn. So how does a person on the other side trying to give, how do we take care of people and make them still feel like they have their dignity and they're not a problem?
Boy, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever thought about it. Isn't that funny? Because I think quite frankly that where the emphasis has to come from is the person who needs the help. And and what I would want to do is work with the person who has Parkinson's and help them understand that, first of all, it is actually a sign of strength to be able to say, I need some help. We hear a lot about vulnerability. That's what that means. When you're vulnerable, you're saying, I don't know how to do this, or I can't do this anymore. This is the challenge. I mean, this isn't anywhere near as serious, but the challenge I have of not having a car. And I have a very busy, full life. How do I do that? Well, I do it by asking for help. I have friends, I have family, I have colleagues, and I have Uber, and I'm able to do it. And I've learned to ask for help. What I do know what, yep, and actually it's a lesson in the book, Richard. See, if I talk long enough, I come up with the answer. I found, as a person who needed help when I had no hands, I found that when somebody said to me, "This is what I would like to do for you," it was very easy for me to accept that help. It was much better than if they said, "How can I help you?" I didn't even know how to ask for help. But I had a friend who said, Doe, it must be hard for you. You're getting ready to move and you have no hands. It must be hard for you to do your paperwork, pay your bills, close your accounts, do all that kind of stuff. If you're comfortable, I would be happy to come over 2 days a week and do all your paperwork for you. Another one said, Doe, I'm really good at throwing things out. You're getting ready to move. You want me to come over and we'll go through your closets and your dressers? And she came over a couple days a week and we would go through a closet and a dresser. Would I ever have asked anybody would you help me sort out the stuff that has to be thrown out? No. My secretary at SUNY Brockport, where I was the dean, came over one day and she said, here's the plan. Meg, who's currently staying with you, is going to drive you to Connecticut the day that the movers come, pack up the house. She's going to drive you to Connecticut. And in the morning, you'll get to the townhouse that you rented sight unseen with the help of somebody who was going to be somebody who worked with me at the university. She said, we'll get there before or Meg will get you there before the movers come. That's going to be Friday. Sunday morning, she's going to go to the airport and pick me up. I'm going to fly in and she'll tell me where your car is. She's going to get on a plane and come home. And I'm going to spend 3 weeks with you. And I will get your license for you. And I'll get everything settled for you. All of the paperwork when you move to a new place. She said, I will hire somebody to drive you to work, to help you get dressed. You can't dress yourself when you have no hands. I will hire somebody to pick you up, get you dressed in the morning, get you to work, pick you up at work, take you to physical therapy, do the grocery shopping for you, fix your meals for you so that you can take care of yourself overnight without her there. And I said, Dorothy, I can't ask you to do that. And she said, well, you didn't ask me. And I said, well, how can you take 3 weeks off? And she said, I have all kinds of vacation time. I can do what I want with my vacation time. And I said, I can't let you do that. You can't use your vacation time to help me this way. And she said, excuse me, you're not my boss anymore. And she did that for me. I don't know how I would have managed that without her. I was living alone. My daughter had gone to college. I never would have asked anybody to do that. But if you can look at what a person needs and guess what they need. It looks to me like you maybe could use somebody to do your laundry. Looks to me like maybe you could use somebody to do XYZ. Most people find it easier to say, yes, I would like that, thank you, than to articulate it themselves. And the other thing I would say is don't assume that what would be good for you in that condition is good for the same person. My colleagues, who I love dearly, they're almost all under 40, and I'm 80. I'm old enough to be their grandmother, almost. They worry about me because they think that I don't take care of myself. I don't rest enough. I don't do enough playing. I need to be engaged. I thrive on the work that comes with being an author. Hello, I recorded the audiobook. That took me a long time. I recorded every chapter. We had to record most of them more than once. It came out this week. I'm excited about that. I did a workshop based on the book for 8th graders last week. Catholic Charities runs a summer program for 8th graders. I've done leadership training at Catholic Charities, and they asked me if I would do a workshop on the book. Well, that was extra work for me. That's how I spent the last weekend planning that workshop. I loved it. It was great fun. The kids loved it. I had them writing their own stories about things that had happened to them and the lessons they learned from it. Don't make assumptions about what the other person needs, but make it possible for them to do what they want and need to do themselves. And hopefully, the other piece of it, as I said, the big piece of it goes with the person with the condition. You can't surrender to the condition. You accept it. You don't ignore it. You do accept it, but you don't surrender to it. I am not a Parkinson's patient. I am a woman who has a lot going on in my life, and I do it in spite of the fact that I have Parkinson's.
Then how, as a person that is a caregiver, my wife is she still caregives for me, still drives me everywhere I can't drive at night, still does so much for me. But like I said, a lot of us that are caregivers, we don't take care of ourselves. And that's my favorite quote is, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
So how do you do self-care? What's some good tips for people that are caregivers? How do they take care of themselves so they can be of better benefit to the person they're taking care of?
I think that's individual also. And I come at this because I know I'm unusual. Self-care for me does not look like self-care to other people. When the pandemic started, well, in January, before the pandemic, in January of 2020, I stepped down from my position as vice president. We'd been grooming a young man who started working for us when he graduated from college. And he told me once about 5 or 6 years before that, he said, someday I want your job, Doe. And I said, well, get thee to graduate school, get a master's degree in an appropriate field, and we'll talk about it. He finished his master's in organizational leadership, and 6 months later, he became my boss. I stepped down as vice president. They call me leadership preceptor. That's my title. And it's the first time that I felt stress from my job. A couple of months into that, February, I was at my neurologist and I said, Dr. DeMarcida, you know how you always, when we talk about whether I should retire, she always asked me, does your work cause you stress? And I always said no. And she said, can you still do it? And I used to say yes. And now I say I can do 75% of it, but I don't need to do that other 25%. I'm the old lady with Parkinsons. These kids who are 35 and 40 can do that. But I said to her, for the first time in my life, I'm stressed at work. And she said, well, what's changed? And I said, I'm only working 30 hours a week. And I would rather be doing the things that I'm not doing that are part of work than trying to find something else that is interesting and challenging and fun to fill that time. And she said, well, have you ever thought about going back to work full time? And I said, when was the last time you suggested a 77-year-old with Parkinson's go back to work full time? And she said, never, but this is you. That's the key. This is you. As it turns out, that a month later, the pandemic started, and I had decided that I was, rather than trying to find someplace else to volunteer, I was going to volunteer at Leadership Greater Hartford. I was going to stop counting my hours. As it turns out, I averaged about 47 hours a week all during the pandemic, and I never got depressed. I was taking care of myself. That doesn't look like self-care to other people, but trust me, it is self-care for me. So we have to know for ourselves. For most people, they do need to rest more than I do. They do need to exercise more than I do. I should exercise that much. Every time I start to exercise, I smash my elbows or something like that. But I'm going to start. Trust yourself. Know yourself. Know yourself. One of the pieces of knowledge, one of the bases of knowledge that I teach that is a core of the work that we do at Leadership Greater Hartford is the Enneagram. Do you know what that is, Richard?
What was it again?
Enneagram.
Mm.
It's a way of understanding personality, and each of us has a core type, and our core type has strengths and shortcomings. And when we get blocked and what motivates us, that's when we go into what I call the uglies. If you know yourself, if you know what it is that blocks you, if you know what it is that makes it easy for you to perform at your best, to give the best you have to the work of the group, then you can do it. So it starts with self-knowledge. And then once you understand yourself, I think you have an obligation to help other people know how they can help you.
And I think this book is going to help a lot of people. I know you guys can't see it probably. But
I am so glad that you like it, Richard. This is just really affirming for me. It makes I wasn't sure anybody would want to read that. And you mentioned earlier, my granddaughter did the illustrations, not the cover, but all the illustrations.
Yep, she did a great job. Courtney, awesome job. You're amazing. Yep. So how do we find you? How do we find the book? How do we get in touch with you?
Okay. Well, the book is right now on Amazon and on Audible. Until I get a lot, I'm going to be really frank here. Until I get a lot more reviews and ratings, it's not going to be anywhere else to buy, because I'm learning that places like Barnes and Noble aren't going to get books until there's a whole lot of reviews. The reviews are wonderful on my book, but there's only maybe 30 or some. It's a small percentage of the books that have been sold. So go to Amazon or Audible, or go to my website. My website is lookmanohands.net, not .com, .net. Lookmanohands. There's all kinds of stuff on my website. You'll see some recordings, some videos that I've done, some teaching that I've done. If we can get it, we'll put the link to this on there. I did a podcast last 2 weeks ago with Akim Nowak. That's on there. There's a wonderful little interview with Ann Nyberg from the Chicago ABC channel. Did a beautiful 7-minute interview with me a couple of months ago. When I got there, I said, Ann, you need to know I'm very nervous. And she said, "Oh, relax. This will be a conversation with you and me. The camera's on, the mic's on, but you'll forget about that." I said, "Well, that's not what I'm nervous about. I've been doing television and radio stuff since I was 5 years old. I'm nervous because I can't possibly do this in 7 minutes. It takes me 7 minutes to say my name." And she laughed. It's a beautiful interview. Beautiful. Um, One of my favorite conversations of all time. This may be the second one. But all of that is on the website. There's a link to buy the books as well. And we keep record. We put records of when I do speeches, when I do presentations. I'm doing readings and signings. I'm willing to travel around the country if people are interested. I love to engage with people, and I'm finding that when I do readings, I sometimes can turn it into almost a little workshop, like I did with the kids the other day. What happened to you that changed your life that you didn't ask for, and what were the lessons that you learned from it? Uh, I'm having a blast. I really am, and learning and growing, and I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like you said, we're put on the planet, and I have to do it better than I've ever done before.
Well, I'm
Thank
so
you.
grateful that we got to hang out today. I'm and
Oh,
I
I
was
love it.
and I was so grateful to be able to get the book. I actually took it to Atlantic City with me just to be able to hang out and relax. So I love it. And I just want to say, no, thank you so much. You're truly an amazing woman.
Oh, thank you, Richard. I think you're a pretty amazing guy. And I can't wait to watch more of your podcasts because
I I
you draw
appreciate
people out. I can tell that you draw people out. You drew me out today.
well, I appreciate it. And guys, if you're watching this on the replay, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. And my favorite quote is it's our choice today to be the victim or the victor. Guys,
Yep.
please choose to be the victor and no
Yep.
longer play the victim. Doe, thank you
Yep.
so much. And when you see your kids, your grandkids, Courtney, just give them hugs and tell them that we love them and we appreciate them.
I will. Thank you so much, Richard.
You're welcome. God bless. And guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. I'll catch you next week. And remember, love each other. Have a great
I
week.
love
Bye,
your
Doe.
title. I love your title. Vertical momentum. Beautiful.